Hey guys, and welcome to another episode of Ireland Crimes and Mysteries. I want to thank you for joining me today, and if you're a returning listener, I want to say a big thank you for your continued support. If this is your first time listening to my podcast, welcome. It's great to have you on board. So without further ado, let's get started on today's story. Ireland Crimes and Mysteries is presented by Go Loud, Ireland's leading audio publisher and the home of Irish podcasts. Find new episodes on the podcast first on the Go Loud app and on your favourite podcast platform. Hey guys, and welcome to this week's mini episode. And today we're looking back at one of the most heartbreaking missing person cases involving an Irish teenager abroad. It's the disappearance of Amy Fitzpatrick, who vanished from the Costa del Sol in Spain on New Year's Day 2008. More than 17 years later, her family are still waiting for answers. So I'll give you a little bit of background on Amy. Amy was born in Dublin on the 6th of February 1992 to Audrey Fitzpatrick and Christopher, also known as Chris Fitzpatrick. She had one brother, Dean, and the two of them were very close. When Amy was a young teenager, her parents separated, and a few years later, Audrey moved with Amy and Dean to southern Spain, settling in Costa, which is an area near Fungarola, a stretch of coast very popular with Irish and British families. In Spain, Audrey began a relationship with Dave Mahan. He was another Dubliner. Family lived in Calahonda, a quite residential town between Fungarola and Marbella. Now, Amy went to school locally for a short while, but she left at the age of 15. Friends described her as bright, funny and full of energy. She was a teenager that loved music, her friends, and spending time with her brother Dean. Others who knew Amy described her as lively, chatty and full of ideas. Her dad said she was a spark. She talked to anyone. She loved animals and was rarely seen without her headphones in, listening to her music. She was also remembered as the kind of person who could make you laugh, even when you didn't feel like it. Amy would spend a lot of time with her best friend, Ashley Rose, who lived nearby. The two were inseparable, always together, listening to music, chatting and staying over at each other's houses. Now that brings us to New Year's night 2008. New Year's night 2008 was a quiet one in Calypso, where Ashley Rose lived. The Christmas lights still hung from balconies, a few fireworks went off in the distance, and most of the bars had already closed early. Inside her friend Ashley Rose's house, Amy had spent the evening helping out with Ashley's younger brother, chatting, watching TV and swapping music on their phones. The two girls were inseparable, almost like sisters, and Amy often stayed there when her mum was working or out late. At around 10 p.m, Amy said she better head home. Now, she just had her mobile phone, her keys, and the clothes she had been wearing all day on her. She left by the front door and turned onto the small residential street that led down towards the main road. The walk between the two houses was short, 10 or 15 minutes at the most. But the route was a bit awkward. Street lighting in that part of Costa was poor in 2008. Some of the lamps didn't work at all. Locals later described patches of the road as almost pitch black once you left the built-up area. The pavement stopped and started, forcing pedestrians to walk along the edge of the tarmac where cars would pass by in very close proximity to you. Now, Amy knew the route well. She'd walked it many times before. She would have crossed the small roundabout near the Calypso Commercial Centre, passed a few shops that were closed, and followed the road that curved gently uphill towards her home in the Riviera del Sol complex. It was a mild night, cool but dry, and there was still the odd group of people heading back from bars and restaurants. That was the last confirmed sighting of Amy Fitzpatrick. What happened on that walk remains unknown. There were no witnesses who came forward to say they'd seen her after she left Ashley's house. No one reported hearing a shout or a car screech. There was no street cameras on that stretch in 2008, and no evidence was ever recovered along the route. At home, her mother Audrey assumed Amy had decided to stay the night with Ashley, something she'd often done. But when the next morning came and there was still no sign of her, the worry began to set in. Audrey called Ashley's house and learned that Amy had left around 10 o'clock the night before. From that moment on, no one ever saw or heard from her again, basically. Posters went up across Costa, Fungarola and Calahonda. Volunteers, many from the local Irish community, joined the search. Spanish police combed scrubland, beaches and vacant buildings with dogs and divers, but nothing was found. Her phone showed no further activity. With no sign of a struggle and no evidence of abduction, police classed it as a missing persons investigation rather than a criminal case. Amy's father, Chris Fitzpatrick, who still lived in Dublin, travelled to Spain several times. He spoke to the media there and at home, determined to keep her story alive in the press. Back in Ireland, vigils were held and flyers distributed across Dublin and Meath. By the summer of 2008, a few unsettling things happened around the case. In August 2008, the home in Costa, where Audrey Fitzpatrick and Dave Mahon were living, was broken into. Several items were taken, including a laptop belonging to their Spanish lawyer, who had been helping with the search for Amy. The lawyer later told reporters that the computer contained correspondence and documents related to the case. Spanish guards confirmed the burglary, but said they found no evidence it was connected to Amy's disappearance. The stolen items were never recovered, and investigators treated it as a straightforward theft. Around the same period, Audrey received a ransom demand by text message. The sender claimed Amy had been kidnapped and was alive, demanding €500,000 for her release. Police traced the message to a prepaid, unregistered mobile bought locally. The Spanish police quickly ruled it as a hoax, finding no proof of any abduction. For Amy's family, it was devastating. The brief hope that she might still be alive, followed by the realisation that someone had taken advantage of their pain. In the months that followed Amy's disappearance, a handful of reported sightings trickled in. Some came from within Costa, others from as far away as Fungarola. Each one gave her family a brief flash of hope, and each, ultimately, led nowhere. One early report suggested Amy had been seen talking to an older man near the Calypso area around the time she vanished. It was checked thoroughly by the Spanish police, but no evidence or corroborating witness ever backed it up. Later that year, in autumn 2008, 3 separate people told police they believed they had seen a girl matching Amy's description at a bar called the Trafalgar. This bar now was in El Zoco Commercial Centre, only a short drive from where she lived. They said the girl was in the company of a blonde woman and appeared anxious. Spanish police took the statements seriously, interviewing staff and reviewing CCTV from the nearby premises. But there was no footage or record to confirm that Amy had ever been there. The lead was ultimately ruled inconclusive. Other calls came in from Malaga, Marbella and even further afield. A woman on the Costa del Sol claimed to have spotted a teenager resembling Amy boarding a bus. Another said they'd seen someone similar in Gibraltar. Each report was logged and followed up, but none produced a verified sighting. Through all of it, Amy's family, both in Spain and back in Ireland, maintained that she would never have run away. Her father, Chris Fitzpatrick, repeatedly told reporters that Amy hadn't taken her passport or any substantial money, and that she'd left behind her phone charger, all her clothes and personal belongings. Her best friend Ashley said the same, that Amy had made plans for the next day and had been talking about starting school again after the Christmas break. She said nothing about her behaviour that evening suggested she was planning to go anywhere. For investigators, those details became central. They pointed not towards a runaway case, but towards a disappearance, one that, 17 years later, still has no answers. As the years went on, the Fitzpatrick family worked tirelessly to keep her name in the public view. Her father Chris travelled between Dublin and Spain appealing for information. He has repeatedly asked that the case be upgraded to a murder investigation, arguing that keeping it as a missing person file has stalled progress. In Spain, the Spanish guards have kept the file open but inactive, saying they'll review any credible new leads. In Ireland, Amy's friends and relatives have continued to hold events every New Year's Day to mark the anniversary of her disappearance. Then in May 2013, tragedy struck again. Amy's brother Dean Fitzpatrick, then 23, was killed in Dublin after an altercation with Dave Mahon, the man who had lived with their family in Spain. Dean was stabbed once in the abdomen. Mahon said Dean had confronted him after a family argument. In 2016, Mahon was found guilty of manslaughter but not murder and sentenced to 7 years in prison. He was released in 2020. Losing Dean after years of uncertainty about Amy broke the family completely. Their father Chris has often said it was like losing both children twice. In the years that followed, Amy's disappearance never faded from public view. Her family, the Irish expat community, and Spanish volunteers refused to give up. Over time, fresh search efforts were launched across the Costa del Sol, especially around Fungarola, Calahonda and surrounding hillsides. One of the largest searches took place in 2013, when new information suggested that Amy's remains might be near the Fungarola racecourse, an area of scrubland not far from where she lived. Volunteers, including Irish and Spanish locals, joined the Spanish police in combing through the ground with sniffer dogs and excavation equipment. A professional search team led by Mark Williams Thomas, the former British police detective and criminologist, assisted in coordinating the effort. For several days, teams searched drains, abandoned buildings and wasteland, looking for anything that could offer a clue. The terrain was rough, filled with discarded debris and overgrown vegetation. Despite the scale of the operation, nothing was found. No remains, no items of clothing, no trace of Amy. Further searches took place in the Miha and Calahonda areas in the years that followed, often prompted by new witness statements and local tips, but each time they ended in disappointment. By then, more than a decade had passed since Amy vanished, yet her name still drew volunteers and news crews each time a new lead surfaced. For her family, these searches were both hopeful and heartbreaking. Moments of belief that answers might finally be close, only to be disappointed once more. In 2017, on what would have been Amy's 25th birthday, her family renewed their appeal, asking for any information at all. In 2023 and again in 2025, The Sun Ireland published fresh interviews with Amy's father, who called on the Spanish police to apply modern forensic technology to any remaining evidence and to treat the case as a homicide inquiry. As of 2025, no one has been charged or arrested. Amy's disappearance remains an open missing persons case with the Spanish police. The Guardian Ireland liaised with the Spanish police through Interpol channels. Amy's DNA and dental records were shared internationally. Over the years, both Spanish and Irish authorities have confirmed that her case remains active, meaning if any remains or belongings are ever found, they would be matched automatically. Her details are still listed by the Garda Missing Persons Bureau, and her family continue to campaign every year for answers. In Ireland, Amy's name is now part of the wider conversation around missing persons. Each year, her photograph is displayed during the National Missing Persons Day ceremony in Dublin, alongside dozens of others still unaccounted for. Her father and extended family attend when they can, keeping her face and story visible. Amy will be 33 years old now. Her father Chris has said many times that he believes Amy's case should be treated as a murder investigation. In one interview he said, "We just want to bring her home. Even if it's only to know where she is, that's all we ask." Now, the facts are simple, and that's what makes this so hard. A 15-year-old girl walked home on New Year's night in 2008 and was never seen again. There's no scene, no trace, no closure. For her family, the waiting has lasted nearly 2 decades. They've faced hoaxes, heartbreak and loss. Yet they still hope that somewhere, someone remembers something that can finally tell them what happened to Amy Fitzpatrick. I've left tip line numbers in the description if anyone has any information, no matter how insignificant you think it is. So guys, that's it for today's episode of the Ireland Crimes and Mysteries podcast. Again, thanks for your listenership, and don't forget to subscribe to the show and hit that auto download so you never miss an episode. Until the next time, keep your eyes open and your mind curious. This podcast has been compiled from information gathered in the public sphere, like news articles, documentaries, and open source material that can be found on the web. Everything in this podcast is alleged unless a conviction has taken place.